This show is sponsored by Realtor Cynthia Bear, Putting Down Roots. Visit your in-town real estate specialist in Atlanta at cynthiabaer.com.
You are now tuned in to the Good Gracious Show. Welcome.
Howdy, Good Gracious family. It is Friday, April 26, 2019. And it is a beautiful day, and this is Boyd Baker, your intrepid host of Good Gracious Show. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a little more than a week. I apologize. Things get crazy this time of the year. I mean, late spring, first off, we end up with pollen out the wazoo here in the South. And those of you who've never experienced pollen or allergies, consider yourself lucky. And, the end of the year with kids, if you got kids, you know it gets maniacal. It is chaos, kind of May and chaos altogether. But, it's a great time of the year. It's beautiful here. And this weekend actually is the Inman Park Festival. So it's an amazing time to kind of celebrate one of the best festivals in the city of Atlanta. You know, there's festivals everywhere for everything, but this one has been going on a long time, and it kind of ties into the project that I'm working on, the new documentary project, xmarksthepark.com. That neighborhood in Inman Park was being, down on its heels and then had to come back up, and part of that comeuppance there was dealing with a potential road that was going to come through. Anyway, look at xmarksthepark.com and you'll find out more. I've got to apologize on this episode, wonderful folks from the Foodwell Alliance as well as Sho Baraka. But Foodwell Alliance had multiple things going on, and we wanted to talk about them all. So there was a Farmer's Jam that came up, and that was last weekend, I believe. And I just didn't get it produced in time. But the next event is the Soil Festival, which sounds interesting, and it is, but it's actually much more about healthful food ways and how we treat our planet, and it's a really fascinating thing that's kind of taken off. So it's over on the West End next weekend, on the weekend of May 4th. So I apologize. You'll hear it mentions to Farmer's Jam, and I just didn't make it in time. My life kind of spins sometimes, and I can't control it, and that I can't work the accelerator and the gas and that steering wheel thing. Yeah. Anyway, this is a wonderful podcast, episode 131. So check it out. The thing that you want to remember is May 4th, next Saturday. You can go to the Soil Festival. It's free during the day. See some really cool stuff. If you got kids, you can take them over there. It's even better. And then that evening at 8 o'clock here in Candler Park, we're doing the next Good Gracious Show, the live show, with some fabulous musicians and poets and speakers. And it's May the 4th be with you. So there'll be a little bit of Star Wars themed stuff, fun stuff going on. Anyway, I hope you enjoy.
Sho Baraka, and I do a lot of dope stuff. So, in the creative field.
Don't a lot of people say they want to say that, but they're not willing to put that line out there, right? Exactly. It's like, that's a T-shirt for you. Yeah. That's what you need. That's your marketing material.
I don't know. Are we allowed to use strong language on here?
You can use the language you feel most appropriate.
Because I didn't know. One of my favorite lines from Kanye is, "I'm Kanye West and I do dope shit."
Yeah.
So
there you go.
That's me. That's what I like to say. But I'm an artist. I'm a creative. I don't know. Am I going into the whole rant right now? What is happening?
I don't know. I told you this is freeform, man.
Okay,
you get to pick.
So
if you want, I can pull out, or you can just let the thread unravel.
I'm gonna let you do all the work. I'm just gonna talk, and you figure out what you want to use. So I am a creative, and that word is not an official noun, but I guess I'm making it a noun. I guess you can say, or an adjective. I don't know.
How did you start?
Yeah,
on your creative path? Maybe?
I have older brothers who love music, and
you don't.
Loved music, and they still love music. I guess is saying. Thank you for catching that.
No problem.
I have older brothers who I grew up with loving music, hip hop music, and it was kind of infectious for me. And so, at a young age, I found myself writing poetry, not raps, but poetry. Also because my parents were very conscious of trying to instill in me history that was like, I guess, paramount for like our people. So Harlem Renaissance. I mean, you name it. And so I fell in love with just poetry at a young age. And then around high school, I realized that all the girls like hip hop artists. So I was like, I'm gonna have to drop this poetry.
Yeah.
That was before slam poetry got real big. And you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I started rapping in high school. Then in college, I came to faith, and I kind of changed how I guess you can say, approached music. Mm-hmm. But then also I recognized, I was like, I don't know if I want to do gospel music. So I studied film and television in college. And that's kind of also was something that bit me growing up in California. I had an aunt who worked in Hollywood. And so we were around film and television a lot. And so here's this individual who loved hip hop, but also loved film and television. And so there was just this, I was just really confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to create. Right. And it's interesting, just recently, I'll say recently, within the last maybe 8 to 10 years, I've finally come into a place where I don't have to compartmentalize my creativity.
I think a lot of artists have trouble with that. They feel like they can only be seen one way, and they can only share it out a certain way.
Yeah, and so...
that's healthy. I think it's healthy.
So yeah, I think that was an important lesson for me to learn. And around that same time, I also recognized that if you know anything about genres, especially kind of like your gospel, Christian, they have expectations on how you are to deliver your music. And without going into a long tirade, I kind of escaped that as well. I felt like I was able to say, you know what, I still hold deeply to my faith, but I don't want to operate within the constructs that they build me. And so... And
do you feel that? I mean, I think every genre has that on some level, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes that's very subjective.
Absolutely.
Do you find that you felt that limited you, or that it just kind of put on certain levels that you said, well, I don't know where my art's going to take me, so I can't necessarily say I'm in that lane. I think both and. I think it limits you because there are some very explicit things that you cannot do. Right? I can't. Like I said, I can't say I do dope shit. Right. Even though I don't think that's an offensive. Like I'm not aiming that towards anyone. Right. So there are explicit things. Sure, nobody curses, right?
Nobody.
So
or has sex.
That's right. That's right. So we need to keep those off the table.
And when I start cursing and talking about sex on my albums, that's when they was like, oh, we've lost him. He's gone. Yeah. But then there's some implicit things that you just can't do or say, and those, depending on what kind of culture you operate in. You begin to kind of deconstruct those as well. For me, it was justice and racism. And they was like, well, you're spending a lot of time talking about things that we think aren't really important. Let's just talk about sin, I guess you can say, right? Our problems. And I'm like, well, this is a problem.
Right.
And so those are the things. And so, and then also in genres, I think, even remove away from some of the religious rhetoric or religious stipulations, I think in general, just the idea of being just entertainment is somewhat problematic because some artists want to educate, some artists want to go deeper than just making kids or youth individuals jump. And I think part of the problem with mainstream hip hop is that primarily throughout history, I think it's somewhat changing, but this extended adolescence, this there wasn't really a space for grown-ups to make music that they felt could connect to other grown-ups.
Mm. In that genre, within that, like if you're going to do hip hop, it's got to be geared toward the youth and the club and everything else.
Right. Well, how do we make music for men? I mean, hip hop is a fairly young genre, right? It's close to 50 years old, and so individuals who were some of the progenitors of it are getting in their 50s, right? And so I'm sure they want to listen to music that is relevant for them. Yeah. And I found myself in the same boat. Like, how do I not only make music for my contemporaries, but I also want to hear music, right? For me, like if I go on iTunes, Spotify, it's music that's perpetually for 18, 25-year-olds, and I'm like, this is good. I mean, I don't have a problem with, but at some rap about taxes, right? Like I'm struggling. Somebody help me out with this. You know what I'm saying? Like this 401k. I'm struggling. Right. But but not exactly. But just to just the issues that we deal with. So anyway, that's those are some of the things that.
So you're creating this whole new genre, is what you're saying.
I won't say that I am, but
somebody's got to, right? Hey man, you might as well until somebody else steps up.
Yeah, I would love to be one of the 4 or 5. If they write a book, just put me in the appendix, or I just want my name come up somewhere.
Well, how do you think that? How does that influence your creativity or your art if you're consciously working on what you see is almost developing a new genre, or do you just feel like what you've been doing is the natural progression there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Let me think through that.
Because sometimes I think artists, if you work too hard,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? You think of what your goal is, then sometimes it can bite you.
Inauthentic. Yeah, I feel like part of it is I've always been somewhat of a, I don't want to say anomaly, but I think even growing up, I don't know if it's just a contrarian in me, but I've always been somewhat different than whether if it was I was one of the only all black kids in a school that I lived in, or an area in which I lived in, then moving into a all black community because my parents divorced and I stayed with my mom who never had a job, and it was just I'm just a weird black kid like, who loved, who had to secretly love like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, but still loved like Harlem Renaissance, even in like 7th grade writing reports about Langston Hughes or Claude McKay, and other kids are like, I'm writing about Tupac. Like, I don't know. well,
but now let's go back here because I think this is part of the challenge. This is part of the challenge, especially kids have, because teens, hard years,
Absolutely.
and you sometimes you form that isolationist mentality that carries you through the rest of your life, which can be bad. That you think I'm the only black kid who's reading Tolkien or who's doing this, but there's others out. It's like today, if you try to find, you go to like Dragon Con, right? And you think you're the only one who's a Trekkie fan, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa.
That's the beauty of community.
These days, community is allowed in certain ways.
That wasn't, I couldn't say that.
You couldn't find it.
I couldn't find it.
You don't see it.
Dragon Con and Comic Con was probably in existence, but I didn't know about it.
Right.
And so you begin to develop. It's actually good because there's this survival list about you. You begin to develop muscles that help you survive in spaces that which you probably wouldn't want to be in the first place. And first of all, don't get me wrong, I loved growing up in those communities. I love living in those communities. What I'm saying is, I think sometimes there is a monolith that is created that is or pushed on people, right? And the greatest lie I think in some of our race, not even race, but like our race discussions our cultural discussions is that black people are monolith, that we're not diverse individuals. And we're very diverse. And so my experience in kind of like my own personal diversity created a certain type of thought process and artistic formation going forth that I found out it's not so unique, right? But you don't get that until college.
Right. And you're working on your own because you spend so much time on your own. Most artists are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you think, I'm the only one that's done this, man.
Yeah, I'm one of a kind. I'm amazing.
That's right.
In college, you realize. And college is truly where, so I went to Tuskegee University, historically black university. And I thought I was going to be the only individual from California, like very few. I was like, it's not going to be a whole lot of people from California there. But then two, I was expecting to see like kind of like this just generalization of black folk. Like they're all going to look like this.
But were you were placing your own, but you were placing your own stereotype on who was going to be there.
I got there and it blew me away. I met black people from Alaska. I met black folks from all over the world. I met black goths. I never even knew there was a such thing as you could be black and goth. I didn't even know you could be black and atheist, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And so I met all these different types of black people, and I was like, this is blowing my mind. And so there is when I think I really came into, I found that community you're talking about, where you find people who maybe like you, but not all the way like you, but still there's ways of culture exchange, even within black communities. I think it was beautiful.
Wow. So how is this now influencing the art that you want to push out into the world right now? Then?
Yeah. I think it's just become a maturation of who I am, feeling secure in who I am. It takes a while, but I think around that same time with the formation of the individuals, the cultural transformation, or like transmitting of ideas to me, but then also this faith element of being like, look, I am who I am, and I can use these resources or use these tools for blessing, or I can use it for detriment. You know what I mean? And so therefore, how I create is only an expression of who I am. And I think there's pressure in a lot of artists. One, their first album is usually their most authentic art.
Right.
Because it's just
the one they've lived with the most. It's so soulful.
And then the second and third album becomes what they expect. I have a friend who talks about when you begin to be consumed with like the voices that it's less creativity, more calculation.
Right. And
people begin to calculate, well, how can I maintain this platform?
And what are other people going to say? What are their expectations? Not what do I want to do?
Absolutely. And then the other really tangible metric is that you change tax brackets.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. A lot of times you don't have to worry about eating.
Exactly. So the problems you had in your first album, like 5-6 years later, especially if you're a mainstream artist who's really hit the bit, like now your concerns have changed. You don't live in the same community. You have your relationships. Now you're struggling to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and now it's, you know.
Well, now you got to struggle to figure out who's real and who's just climbing on the coattails.
So I think for me, it's just been trying to, how do I maintain the authenticity of who I am as I've grown and evolved. My tax bracket has changed somewhat since my first album. Not drastically,
but not as much as you want.
Exactly.
But that's life.
It's changed.
Yeah.
And so some of the concerns I had when I was, you know, when I first started in '07, my first album, '07, is different from 2019.
Yeah.
But there's still that Sho in me who has this affection to talk about things from a paradigm that I think will help enlighten folks.
Do you feel that's what you aim to do with most of your music, is to allow space for discussion or thought?
Yeah, I think there's
I don't want that to sound like it's a really, you know, educational album you're cranking. You know, some people go, "Oh, don't make me think." It's like, okay, no, you'll enjoy it. Just listen to the words. Maybe.
No, absolutely. I think so in hip hop there are different types of. In hip hop there are different types of. I think people approach the craft differently. I would say I approach it as a lyricist. If I was not a hip hop artist, and if I did folk or if I did alternative, I'll be a singer-songwriter, right? Because I just love the words. I love playing with words. And so I have no quarrels with people approaching my music and feeling like it's lectures or it's thoughtful and they're wrestling with that. But I also want the music to be engaging. I want them to enjoy it. There's songs where I want you to dance. Literally, I want you to, don't listen to it, just dance. Yeah. But then there are songs where I want you to be in deep reflective thought. So I forgot the question.
No, I think you hit it. Yeah, no, the point is, most every musician or writer wants people to see a deeper something, whether it's what they see or to reflect on them personally and how it ties in, and that's what you kind of aim to do with your music, you know. But it's not always, you know. We all got to take a breather now and then.
So I do. I think it was you. So my music does present itself, or I like to think it presents opportunities for discussion to happen. I also want to challenge thought too. Like there's some things I just want to be like, that's stupid and don't do that anymore. So but there are some things that are like, hey, let's reason, like let's think through what I'm discussing, challenge, push back, let me know where I may be.
Do you find those discussions for you personally, are they within the musical community that you're reaching? Are they within your cultural community, or they cross everywhere?
I like to think I think initially it started off in a more religious context. I think in the last 6 years it's definitely become more intersectional in the sense that I think it's not just one particular group of people, it's artists. I have a line where I say, my white friends think I'm all about black power. My black friends live in their ebony tower. My artist friends have terrible work habits. My Christian friends got the truth but live passive. I reproduce their habits. I can't even hate. I guess we're all brothers, but I still can't relate if we say God is real while we act so fake. So that's just the kind of idea of like all these different communities which I exist in. And I'm trying to pull like essence from all of them, truth from all of them, but I realize that they're all flawed in some way, right? And so how can we create greater conversation?
Yeah. So how do you create greater conversation beyond the track? You know, beyond just dropping a good one.
Yeah. Well, I have an opportunity that maybe some artists don't, is that I lecture a lot as well because of primarily my last 2 albums. Because of I'll just say it, I'm not sound arrogant, but the density of content and like some of the things that I wrestle with, I've been asked to lecture in colleges. You name it. I've had somewhat of an opportunity to do that, and so a lot of people may even know me not even as like a musician. They
but as a
speaker,
know me
because they came across an article I wrote or a lecture that I had, and so then they get introduced to my music. So. Yeah, I think I have a great opportunity to be able to extend the conversation outside the music in classroom settings, in community center settings, in church settings, in whatever. You feeling like there's opportunity for me to be able to extend conversation. I think it's been a benefit for me because it's also what it's also done. It's challenged me to think more broadly and to.
Meaning in what your art and your music maybe was more focused on the religious folk.
Yeah.
And that I think that's important. I find it interesting the longer I do this, I speak to a lot of different folks who are just doing amazing work in the community, and folks who are incredible artists and musicians. And it's not always on the sleeve, but every now and then, there's a strong religious line through somebody's work, or through their passion. You never know it. Listen to their music. You listen to their music, and you're like, man, that's great. Yeah. But then you meet them, and there's this. You can tell there's a certain glow in a certain way, and I find that interesting coming from my background of being raised Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian over the years, that they don't come to the forefront. Kind of like you went the opposite way, right? Yeah. You started in the forefront, and now you might be seeing the broader scope. And I wonder, are they going to go from the broader scope to then come into a more, religious bent on maybe how they view their art? And sometimes, age. Age does a lot to us. Changes the way our perspective and what we feel is important. Yeah. But, I mean, they're both...
I can't think of one right now, but I definitely know...
Yeah. Well, I mean, Amy Grant was the biggest thing in the world, and she took slings and arrows for doing anything pop related. And then I believe she's now back in the full-on religious musical sphere. But I find it interesting that for whatever reason we draw that line, and it is on how it's presented, right? I mean, I think you can look at a lot of pop music, hip hop, anything else, and say there's real spiritual value in what they're saying, and there's discussions we need to have. Too often,
pop music's the devil. That's
yeah, we're not going to talk quality here. Okay, we're not going to get into that game, all right? Because it's there. You might have to dig a little more. You're going to find the good stuff.
But no, you're right.
Yeah, but it is, and see, my question is always, okay, how do we? You're absolutely right. How do we take that conversation from that? That one track that might have been controversial. Somebody saying, you're trying to tell people to act how, or we need to change what? And it's like, well, let's talk about this. You really think we don't? Well, then, okay, let's put it all on the table. Because let's be honest, people here are seeing you this way. Absolutely. And people here are acting this way. But if we never really bring it up, in church or outside of church, how does life get better? Yeah,
everybody's preaching a message of some sort.
Oh, yeah.
And so the difference is some people are trying to proselytize, others aren't necessarily trying to proselytize. And I think I've kind of moved from the proselytizing to more of a form discussion in my music. More from a street evangelist to a panel discussion. It's like, here's my view.
Well, in some respects, that can be a very beneficial position. If people don't see you as a religious leader, they see you as an artist with a religious understanding.
And that's, it's funny, that's been something that I've intentionally tried to remove or like to transition from. Because I think I have a brother who's a pastor in the city here, great man. And not only because of him, but I think because of the circles that I moved in for many years, I felt the pressure to be a religious individual who made art. And I think now, or in recent years, I felt very comfortable in just being an artist, a creative. It's even changed a lot of what I've read and how I consume stuff. Because before I was reading mostly theology stuff, or now it's like, I just want to read novels. I just want to read novels, and I want to read artistic stuff, and I want to be able to feel like my music and my art, whether it be literature or our visual creativity, I want people to get arrested by the art, and then there's a message that's tied to it that I think hopefully they can connect with as well.
You see how your life is kind of full circle right now, how you started with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and now you are Tolkien and C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, a lot of people don't know that. I mean, they just go, these guys, it's like, no, you look at who they were and what their faith was.
Absolutely.
It's a different world.
It's a different, and it's the reason why I use those gentlemen is because of that, is because C.S. Lewis in particular was an individual who actually catalyzed me into this kind of thought. I was reading, can't remember what I was reading. It may have been The Great Divorce, but it was something I was reading. I mean, all of his work is great, and I remember thinking that, well, it was a statement that he said, and I think Flannery O'Connor has a similar statement where she says, or they say, the world doesn't need more Christian painters, we just need better painters, or something like that. And so, for me, it was like, one of the things that, even if I wanted to proselytize, the problem is the art is not really that good. Well, not my art, but a lot of people's art is just not good. Right. And so, I think their attention is snatched by how excellent something is. And you think about C.S. Lewis, that's what it was. I went to go see C.S. Lewis off Broadway. Screw Tape Letters.
Oh, wow.
And I remember sitting there thinking, and I was like, I love C.S. Lewis, but this room is packed. And then the actor did a quick survey at the end of the show and asked how many people in the room actually believed in a God. And like it was only like 30% of the people raised their hand. And it was just amazing to me that this great art about explicit religious principles is being done off Broadway, and 70% of the people there don't even believe in the God that C.S. Lewis believes in. Yeah. And it's just like, this is what great art can do for you.
Yeah.
Right? It can create conversation and discussion for folks.
It's an opening.
And it's opening. And so that's when I was like, you know what? And that was around 2011, I think it was. And I was like, I'm doing this all wrong.
Yeah.
But God bless the folks who want to do it differently. For me, I was like, I got to do something.
Everybody's got to do the thing. So let's talk. So how do you do what you do? What is it? I mean, do you just work solo? Do you try to pull together people sometimes? Or
I work with anybody who's tolerable.
And tolerant.
Tolerant, yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And
it goes both ways.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm not tolerable. So they have the choice to say, I can't work with you. Yeah. But yeah, I work with anybody. I mean, within reason, obviously. I work with anybody who I think shares a vision of wanting to make, one, great music, but two, music that we believe the end, we may have different means, but the end, at the end of the day, we just want to see a better world. My world may look a little different from theirs, but at the end of the day, we're trying to create something that blesses people.
Yeah.
And so I bring like a shalom, right, a peace. And so one of my favorite people to work with is a dude who's not religious. He's just kind of like but he's a great guy named Jamie. He produced most of my last two albums actually, and but when we get together, there's no conflict, right? Of interest, I guess you can say. And so in that, I'll work with anybody, and I'll work with anybody who I think shares the vision of making really great music that's gonna be, I guess you can say, that's gonna promote flourishing in a sense.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Do you have anything specific?
A lot of stuff. It's so much. I've also gotten over this thing where I felt like I was working on too much stuff. I used to feel like I gotta stop working on too much. But you know what? I'm like, that's just who I am. I work on a lot of things, and
you only got so many days, dude. You only got so many days.
And as long as I feel like I can do those things in excellence, then I'm content. Like when I feel like I'm cheating something, then hopefully I have people around me who say, "Man, you need to. This is not good." My wife won. Yeah. Then other folks will be like, "Look." So a couple of things I'm working on is right now, not necessarily music or an album, but I wrote a play along with some individuals. In 2017, we started, and it's based on the 1968 sanitation workers strike that led to MLK's death. And we performed that 4 times so far. It has been amazing. It's a musical. And so that's one thing we're continuing to build and develop. The other thing that I'm working on is a novel right now. This is my first... I've written academic, written academic stuff for other people, not a full book, but this is the first full-length kind of literary piece that I'm so excited. Like this is probably the most excited I've ever been.
Well, because it's new, right? You're kind of learning something, and you're a little scared. You're a little It's like that first date.
Exactly.
You know, you're going,
like,
oh man, this is gonna be so good, or this is gonna be horrible.
It's gonna be terrible. Right now, I'm like, this is gonna be the most amazing thing anybody's ever read in their life.
Well, you have to have that opinion, or else you can't plow through it. You know.
And then when somebody's like, well, let me check it out. Let me read it. I'm like, no, because you're gonna hate it.
Yeah.
This is gonna be so bad. So yeah, that, and then the play, the novel, and then there's this there's a collaboration project I'm working on that's a variety, like an educational variety show for kids.
Yeah.
Kind of like an electric company.
Yeah.
And so that's the film side. So there's the film, the music, and the...
Well, that's keeping you busy.
Yeah, man, I love it.
Yeah.
I am excited.
Well, I'd
rather be busy than begging somebody for work.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if people want to find out what you're up to or how to dig into what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
On social media, I think all social media platforms, it's AMI Sho Baraka. So Am-I Sho Baraka? But that's actually my name, Amisho Baraka, which is really interesting. So it's AMI SHO BARAKA. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Well, thanks for coming in, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.
So my name is Kim Karris. I am the Executive Director of Foodwell Alliance. In Foodwell Alliance, we are a collaborative network of local leaders working together to build thriving community gardens and urban farms across Metro Atlanta. And as an alliance, we believe that food builds community, and we believe that thriving gardens and farms really strengthen the heart of cities.
Yeah. How long has Foodwell Alliance been around, and how did they get started?
Sure. So we've been around since 2015, not too long. About 4 years ago, we got started. But our roots really go much further back with the Atlanta Community Food Bank, as our founder, Bill Bowling, is also the visionary of Foodwell Alliance. And he and Jim Kennedy from the James M. Cox Foundation really sat down and to realize a vision around an organization that would bring organizations, growers, community gardens together to start to think about how do we not only connect to each other, but connect to where our food comes from? How do we preserve spaces where we can reconnect to the earth, reconnect to our food, and of course to our neighbors?
Yeah. How does that work in a city like Atlanta? I mean, it's a beautiful thought.
Sure.
And it's a big challenge, even though we know there's space all around us that we probably ignore every day.
Right.
But how do you try to grasp more local thoughts and things of that nature?
I think it's even more timely more than ever. I live in the city of Decatur, whether you live in Decatur or Lawrenceville or South Fulton or Marietta or Southwest Atlanta, what we're all sharing is the reality that our cities are changing, and that they're rapidly redeveloping, and lots more people are coming to live here in Metro Atlanta. It's one of the fastest growing regions in the country, and so this is putting more pressure, right, on our food producing spaces, whether it's a garden or a farm or an orchard or an edible park. I think it's the way we think about parks and green space is sort of how we're trying to reimagine our gardens and farms. And so in 2017, we produced what we call a local food baseline report, really trying to understand, okay, what's the state of our food system here in the Metro Atlanta region? And that's Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Clayton, and Gwinnett counties. That's what we serve, at least. And that out of that report, we certainly saw a lot of activity around urban agriculture, farmers markets, school gardens, people composting, lots of local food enterprises. But what we realized from the data, it showed that if you're growing food as a food enterprise, as a farm enterprise in the 5-county region, you're making less than $25,000 a year. So you're struggling. You're not quite viable, not long-term sustainability.
And you're trying to live in a city or near a city.
And you're trying to live in the city. And exactly. So the cost of living is so high. The cost of land is so high. Finding consumers who really understand the value of soil and the earth and why growing hyper-local food is so important. And the second thing we learned from that report really is that there's a lot of work around food access and trying to sort of get local healthy food into communities who most need it and neighborhoods who most need it. But what the data is really showing is that just proximity to the food is not enough to change behavior around eating. That actually when you have an experience on a farm, when you stick your hands in the soil, that's when you start to have an aha moment and start to change behavior around eating. And so it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're living in, we're all disconnected from our food. Mm-hmm. And so our work is really preserving, protecting those spaces, and really uplifting the voices, the growers who are doing this work. And so we're really excited about opportunities to do this, like our Soil Festival in May, where we partner with an urban farm called Truly Living Well. And we've done this over the last 5 years. And, it started off as a small little event where we did composting workshops and gardening workshops. And now it's turned into a whole community family festival, really, where kids can play in the soil. They have science activities, they have a petting zoo, they have all sorts of ways to engage on farm. And then the adults and families have ways to really think about, well, how can I participate in this food system? I may not be a gardener, I may not be a farmer, but I could certainly separate my food scraps and return them back to the soil and into compost for growers. So
where is that going to be?
Yeah, so Truly Living Well is located, it's in the College Town neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta. It's right in front of Morehouse College. And so on May 4th, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., we're shutting down Lawton Street, which is the street right adjacent to the farm, and we're expecting thousands of people this year. We've got soccer in the streets.
Oh, nice.
We've got steam truck to come and do some fun kids activities. We've got a beer garden this year. We've got music. We've got certainly all of the educational activities are there too. So it's going to look and feel like a festival, but all around soil, which I thought, in 2015, and kind of scratching my head, are we really going to get people to come to an event called Soil Fest? Not very creative, but actually it's an aha moment where people realize, if you want healthy food, you need healthy soil, particularly in an urban area. And not a lot of folks kind of realize how important that is.
We're disconnected from
That's
that
right.
since we're not agrarian as much, especially in the cities.
That's
so
right.
A lot of people don't realize that.
That's right.
So what is your... I'm assuming this is a fundraiser of sorts as well for either Foodwell Alliance or other organizations?
This is a 100% free event to
Okay.
the community.
Okay.
This is something that we've committed to do every year. A lot of, like I said, it started off small, and what we've realized is that for a lot of folks, this is their first time on a farm. And to see food being grown in the city, right here in the middle of the city, is something we want to make sure all people can have access to.
So if you had a perfect druther, so to speak, of what people walk away from the festival with, what would it be, though? Do you want them to go home and say, okay, I'm going to try to plant a garden or a pot? We'll start small.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think we talk a lot about healthier communities. I mean, we certainly talk a lot about healthier lifestyles. And I think there's an intrinsic understanding or a cognitive association with healthy community, healthy bodies, with healthy food. But the healthy food requires healthy soil. That connection is still being made. And so you can look at two, pieces of broccoli. And if that broccoli was not a nutrient-dense, high-quality soil, chances are it doesn't have the nutrition that we actually need. So it's not just about eating healthy; it's about having healthy soil. So I think people walking away with that understanding is certainly number one. The fact that there's a farm right in the city that they can come to buy food at the farmer's market, or to take your kid to a summer camp.
Yeah, they do
on
classes
the farm.
there too, don't
They do
they?
classes
Yeah,
all year
yeah.
round. That's a resource that they have, is also another takeaway. And then the third is that there's a movement. There's a movement happening in Atlanta, and I think that it's, we have perceptions of just gardening as a pastime, and really this is a community that is sort of reclaiming their connection to the land, really focus on what is the future of Atlanta. How do we participate in what we want our city to look and feel like? If we're not careful, we will be covered in concrete. And so those are some of the takeaways I think people will walk away with.
And so Foodwell Alliance, in a perfect world, it's, say, what does it see as its 5-year or 10-year goal? Is it to become more, because it's a very challenging position I think you're in, very exciting, I'm sure, because there's opportunities, but as most people don't know what Foodwell Alliance is,
Sure.
What should they see it as? I mean, you see your farmers, or in theory, you have that from the farmers markets, or your concept of that. But how does the Alliance work in the kind of ecosystem of the food bank and the farmers and other products?
Sure. Well, I think, one of the things that we're centered on, laser focused on, is the viability of gardens and farms. It's not enough to provide them financial resources. So as a grant maker, we've actually re-granted $3.5 million in about 150 organizations. These are farms, gardens, farmers markets, organizations working on food access, nutrition. And what we've seen is that just financial support is not enough, because they're working in an environment that oftentimes isn't supportive of what they're doing, just because, like you said, the cost of living or the lack of awareness. And so we do 3 things to try and increase their viability and sort of permanent value in the metro Atlanta region. The one is just provide resources. These are for the growers. These are people who are toiling in the soil, who are growing the food for their communities and nourishing our city. So this is everything from financial support to infrastructure to access to compost to volunteers. We just started a partnership with the Atlanta Community Tool Bank, where we are now, for the first time ever, purchasing heavy equipment like tractors and tillers that can be shared. It's a lending program that any time of the year, growers can now access this heavy equipment. We've started a partnership with the Atlanta Botanical Garden, doing regular seasonal workshops for gardens and particularly community gardeners. So that's the first thing, just working directly with the growers. But the second thing is something that we realized we had to do, which was more recent, was we're now working with local governments and cities themselves to start to think about how do we plan for urban agriculture? How do we incorporate food producing spaces in the development of a city? And we have partnered with the Atlanta Regional Commission to start and pilot the first ever city agriculture planning process. So they do plans for housing and transportation.
They do everything.
But they've never done a food plan. They've never done an agriculture plan. And so we're piloting that this year with one city, and really excited to sort of roll that out so that these spaces are now permanent and protected.
That's pretty fascinating. So what brought you to Foodwell Alliance?
Yeah, well, I was part of the Foodwell Alliance founding team back in 2015, and have been just so.
Yeah, but how'd you get there?
So blessed and privileged to be able to watch this grow. So I went to Agnes Scott College a long time ago, and started off as really interested in sort of social justice, and I thought, well, how does the environment play into this? Where's the intersection with social justice and environmental justice? And so that took me on a journey to Central America, where I worked with agricultural communities, mostly in Mexico, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. And then I ended up going to graduate school in Costa Rica at the United Nations School, studying food systems, sustainable food systems. And it was just around the time, it's funny because when I was living in Atlanta, I didn't know that there was a local food movement or that there were farms in the city at the time.
You had gardens right around you.
I had gardens right around me. So I had to go to Latin America to learn about these things. And when I came back, it was right around the time that you can notice that the local food movement had taken off in Atlanta, and I just was able to connect with Bill Bowling and had the opportunity to join Foodwell Alliance, which is really, we're still nascent, to be honest, compared to other cities in terms of our food movement, but we are growing every day.
Well, what cities do you see as being at the forefront, or maybe at the ascendancy more?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think of urban agriculture at its finest, you think of your typical cities like New York. New York City has an incredible urban agriculture movement. They have no other place to grow other than on the rooftops, and finding spaces is more challenging, but also the need is so great. So there's a quite vibrant movement there. Certainly LA has a great food policy council in LA, which is a model for us all. But then you see cities like Detroit, who out of necessity really started to think creatively about how do we turn these vacant lots into food producing spaces, and how do we protect and preserve them, and so that growers young people who want to train in how to grow food, they have places to do this and create access to healthy local food. Certainly you have Boston, and all of these cities are models, but being in the South, Atlanta really is paving the way, I think, in terms of how do we make an equitable food movement. So a lot of these food movements have historically been affordable and available for people who look like me, which is, young white woman. And I think in Atlanta, we have an opportunity to make sure that this foodie movement is one that's equitable and accessible to all. And I think that's what's unique here in Atlanta.
Do you think in a perfect ecosystem, so to speak, of how we look at our cities and where we want to live, does it seem like this needs to be embedded kind of in our government. I mean, it's great that we have entities like Foodwell Alliance,
Sure.
but ARC is obviously part of that
That's
governmental
right.
structure on some level. But it seems like kind of a natural that it should be part of the way the city looks at things.
100%. And 2 years ago, I believe, maybe 2.5 years ago, we actually got our first city agriculture, I think it was urban agriculture director, Mario Cambardella. So City of Atlanta actually preserved a salaried position within the local government here in City of Atlanta to focus on urban agriculture. There's only a handful of urban agriculture directors in the country, so this was a big win for us. And what they've been able to do is work with Georgia Power and other city-owned lands to preserve growing spaces. They call it the Grows a Lot program. And there were about 10 sites that are now preserved for community gardens and urban farmers. And it's a pretty innovative concept, and we love to see that replicated. And we have about 54 cities in the 5-county region. All cities can do something like that to prioritize food producing spaces. And some of it, each city is different. They have different assets. They have different challenges. One city might be, more of an edible park, partnering with like a Park Pride and figuring out how do we create a public orchard or something like that. And others more could be like a big city, like City of Atlanta, preserving large tracts of land for food production. Absolutely think that it has to be incorporated into planning in local governments. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how entrepreneurial you are. There's a lot of policies and ordinances that would make it easier to do this work.
Yeah, for sure. And I've often wondered why we don't have more edible orchards, as you say. I mean, with all the green space we do have, and trees are trees, right?
Yes,
to some
that's right.
degree, but why we haven't had a little bit of a focus on our public parks putting in nut and fruit trees.
Exactly.
Do you know? Is there?
Well, I think, to talk about the challenges, it is, it's a maintenance issue. So fruit falls at very specific times of the year, and there's no stopping it. And so unless someone is, ready, or community is ready to forage and to pick that fruit up so it doesn't get to the ground and kind of spoil, I think that's a concern. But honestly, I think we're getting to a place where consciousness is being raised about the opportunities we have and turning those challenges into opportunities. For example, there's an organization called Concrete Jungle.
Right, I know that. Yeah,
yeah.
I've had them. They're wonderful.
So they mapped all the fruit trees out, so they know exactly when they're going to be ripe, and they take a bunch of young people out and old, to go forage and make sure that they preserve that food and either give them away or use it. And so there's lots of opportunities, and I think as we're getting there, Farmer's Jam is actually a really sweet event that happens multiple times a year. It's led by a young man who and his organization called Longleaf Media, and it's essentially it raises awareness around fruit trees. And the jam and Farmer's Jam is actually given away at the end, but it's a musical event where farmers actually take stage with other farmers and play music, and they're bringing attention as well to the need and also the opportunity we have to protect and plant and prioritize fruit trees in our city.
Yeah. When is that going to happen?
That's actually on Earth Day this year, April 22nd at Monday Night Brewing. Oh. It's going to be so much fun.
Is it the brewing that's on the west side or down by the new one, the garage down at yes, off Lee Street, I believe it is.
Yes, it's off Lee Street, off the Beltline. That's right. Yeah. And so that's also a free event. There's going to be food trucks and beer, of course. I know that's being put on in partnership with the Atlanta Community Compost Council, which Foodwell Alliance helped start. And
how long has the Compost Council been around?
Oh my goodness, not very long at all. we started in about a year ago in partnership with the EPA and Georgia Recycling Coalition, and this is to further think about policies, infrastructure, and also awareness raising around the need for community-wide and community-based composting efforts. I think that's an opportunity that we have as city dwellers. like I said earlier, we're not all going to be growers, but we all can participate because all of our food scraps, if we eat, we're in, right? So if the food scraps can be separated and returned and composted back into the soil, it's like gold for the gardens and farms. So when we think about the resources they need to be thriving and viable, compost is one of them. And that's why Soil Festival is so exciting, because I think that it raises awareness about, hey, I can do something about this. It's really actually not that hard. Just like the way we kind of changed our minds around recycling in general, which was 20 some odd years ago. I think we're on the move here with how we can do that with composting food scraps and organic waste. And it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see that opportunity arise.
And that's great. Well, if people want to learn more, if there's opportunities to get involved, volunteer, do anything else, what's the best way for them to learn about you?
Yes. So foodwellalliance.org, you can certainly visit our website. All of the information about Soil Festival, about Earth Day Farmers Jam, about other resources to start a garden or volunteer or participate in other events is certainly at our website. But you can follow us on social media. Those are the real-time live updates. So at Foodwell Alliance is Instagram and Twitter. The Foodwell is Twitter. Twitter is the Foodwell. Instagram is at Foodwell Alliance.
I tell you, it's fascinating.
It is. It is.
But if people search, they'll find it. I'm sure.
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it. Another one in the can. So check out Sho Baraka. Lots of really cool projects he's working on. I mean, I meet more artists than I do individual painters or musicians or anything else, because once they get that creative energy unleashed, it's really hard to focus on just one thing. And he's got some really interesting stuff online. If you're not checking this, check it out online at goodgracioushow.com, and you'll see a link to some music he's done. And, then you can scroll around all kinds of fun things. And check out the Soil Festival next weekend, May 4th, as well as that evening, 8 p.m. at Neighborhood Church in Candler Park. We are putting on Good Gracious Show number 15. You can get your tickets at goodgracioushow.com. And we got, who do we have? We got Alyssa and Peter. Peter's in a Yacht Rock Review here in town, and they also play nationally. So got them, got Teresa Davis, amazing spoken word slam champion. We've got Dad's Garage doing improv comedy. They are fantastic. They never fail. And Morgan Rowe, we've got her, and we've also got, she's a singer-songwriter, and then there's Ashley Jones with Love Not Lost. You got to hear the story about what these people do. It's really amazing. So, a show is a show, right? But it feels like family. This is like you're coming into a small town, and you're seeing what they've got to offer, because the South isn't really that big. We're all connected a lot closer than most people realize. But you get music, you get art, you get comedy, you get just good community. So if you're looking for something different to do and you've been thinking, oh yeah, I'll go check out that show, well, make this the show you come to. If you're a Star Wars fan, come dressed up. Maybe you'll get in for free, because I think we should. If you go to the problem or the hassle to dress up in your favorite costume from the Star Wars realm, hey, I think you should get in. So I'll make that edict right now. So hope to see you next Saturday. Otherwise, be a good neighbor, hug someone, and we'll talk to you next week.
Marley? Yeah. You got a Marley designated for the jam?